In this class, we will be seeing conscience as the moral faculty. Conscience as a moral faculty. A distinction must be made. A distinction must be made between conscience as moral faculty, conscience as moral faculty, comma, which manifests to men their moral obligations and impels them to fulfill and conscience as practical moral judgment, and conscience as practical moral judgment, comma, which tells men in the concrete situation what their moral obligations are. So here we have to understand two things. One is as a moral faculty, that means capacity. A person can judge. Other one is practical judgment. When the situation arises, how a person is judging. Is he making or she is making use of her capacity to judge well? So, the practical moral judgment is very important. And for that, moral capacity is there. So, these two has to go hand in hand. That's why in the gospel we see here, Jesus telling about, by their fruits the trees are known. By their fruits the trees are known. So also by the people's decisions, people's personality is seen. The first one we see secular views. How the secular world understand conscience, how they imbibe and how they judge. Every man of good reason is demanded to do the known good and which accuses him if he refuses to obey this call. Which accuses him if he refuses to obey this call, comma, is actually a universal phenomenon. Is actually a universal phenomenon. In the introduction we have seen this inner reality, inner authenticity or conscience is not particular to one culture, one nation or one generation. It is common to human existence. So it is within, in each person, whatever the religion one professes, or in whatever country one might have born. But this is a common element to be human. So it is an inner capacity. There is no culture where conscience is not recognized as fact. There is no culture where conscience is not recognized as fact. Generally, among primitive peoples, expressions such as heart, and loins, L-I-O-N-S, loins, replace the word conscience. So some of the languages have their own slang, their own word. So in our language, in the local, what word we use sometimes to say? Is it true? Some of the languages have their own words. So here is the inner conviction, the heart. Although in the process of secularization, in modern times, the religious aspect of conscience was given up. The religious aspect of conscience was given up. Immanuel Kant still thought of conscience as the consciousness of an interior court. Of justice in man. This is the definition of Immanuel Kant, understanding conscience. Conscience is the consciousness of an interior court of justice in man. So where justice is procured, when suppose injustice is done, where we go? We go to the court. We apply, the injustice is done to me, justice to be done. So that's why every nation has their court systems. In the court, they get justice, or what is right, what is wrong. So Immanuel Kant understanding is our conscience is the court of justice. That is, what is one's due, what is one's duty, one has to do, one will get. So that's the understanding of conscience as the consciousness, awareness. Consciousness means awareness. Then Martin Heidegger, another philosopher, Martin Heidegger, sees in conscience the call of care. Call of care in inverted commas. Call of care, which keeps existence from the impersonal man, and which is open for the voice of being. So Heidegger's understanding of conscience is a call for care. That's why every person, whatever may be, however bad one may be, still he or she has a obligation to take care of oneself, to take care of others. So that interest in others, interest in oneself, the call for care is what is understood as a conscience, the inner capacity to long for. Psychologists say conscience is a genuine sense of self-esteem. According to psychologists, conscience is a genuine sense of self-esteem and appropriate serving and appropriate striving, working towards. For normal human beings, conscience is a normal development. For normal human beings, conscience is a normal development within every human being. Within every human being. It is an indicator. Conscience is an indicator that tells us some activity, on our part is disrupting or has disrupted an important aspect of our self-image. An important aspect of our self-image. So here, when you are talking about the secular views, we have taken some of the philosophers and psychologists, and for them, according to them, is a consciousness which speaks of justice, which is to be done. So justice cannot be denied. Each one should get its own due or one's own portion, like a distribution. No, when we say distribute, if only one takes all part, others will not get, and others will be deprived of. So also every individual has one certain things to be accomplished and certain duties to fulfill, and that has to be done by only that person. So it's a consciousness of the individual person. And again is a care. Every human being has a instinct to care for oneself and care for what one likes. So that is another important aspect. Then psychologists say is a self-esteem. Self-esteem is very important, and this also is works like indicator. And when we are working with machines, lot of indicators are there, no? Lot of indicators. They are remaining as a sign which shows the inner reality. So also the inner reality of the person is shown by one's conscience. So it is an indicator. So if a conscience is working well, if the indicator is working well, inner reality also well. Otherwise it will be mistaken. It will be problems will be there. Accidents will be there. If the indicator shows one, like example, when you go using our vehicle, bike, suppose indicator is there of the fuel. Suppose it is showing the full and your vehicle is not running, that shows the indicator is not correct. So with that indicator, no one tries to drive the vehicle, because the indicator and the reality is not matching. So it's dangerous. So also one's person's life and one's conscience has to go in similarity. Then only the person also, what one does, what one says will be meaningful, and others also take into confidence. Otherwise, indicator is showing one and the reality is another one. Then there is a difficulty of adjusting, difficulty of corresponding. So our conscience is like an indicator of the personality, is of the individual existence. Now second point we see, second point, conscience in faith perspective. Conscience in faith perspective. Secular theology and traditional manuals of moral theology, secular theology and traditional manuals of moral theology commonly consider conscience not as a separate moral faculty, not as a separate moral faculty, but as a particular instance, of the operation of reason. But as a particular instance of the operation of reason. Conscience is the process. Conscience is the process in which the general norms of the moral law, are applied to a concrete action, which a person is about to perform, or has performed, telling the person what his obligation is here and now, or judging his past acts, When we spoke in the introduction about conscience, we have seen this anterior conscience and posterior conscience. What you are speaking here is a process, a capacity evaluating the situation or the one's actions or one's decisions. Action doesn't mean that on that what you do act only. Even if you make a decision, the conscience is working. Even when you are agreeing with somebody or with some decision, your conscience is working. So that way is a continuous process, an inner process of the person. So it is a knowledge is there, awareness of the situation is there, and according to that one, a person is judging for or judging against. So all doesn't mean that we have to say always yes. When person's conscience feels that is not good for me, by the way somebody good for others, but it's not good for me, or it may be good later, it may not be good for now. So that's why every time it has to be evaluated. The capacity to evaluate every time, like it's like a driving. When you are traveling, however you are tired, the driver cannot take rest. Others may take rest. Passengers may not know even they are traveling. Equally they are like taking rest on the bed. But the driver is always constantly has to make a decision, guiding, applying the brake, applying the accelerator, and stopping for some time, going slow at times, going faster at times. This all demands a constant observation and response to the observation. So our human conscience also is working as a driver. So that is one of the important aspect is of the process and the judgment. So these two are there. Is taking into consideration the situation and it responds positively or negatively. So there is a inner process that is going on. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, conscience is a judgment of practical reason. According to Thomas Aquinas, conscience is a judgment of practical reason. He concludes that synthesis as the core of conscience, in a habitus of reason. He concludes that synthesis as the core of conscience as a habitus of reason. Are you familiar with the word habitus? Latin word habitus. In English we say habit, habitus, habitat. There are many words with habitat. Habitus means residing, the location. Habitus of reason. So conscience is the habitus of reason. So conscience is in the reason. If conscience is not in the reason, then that reason may not have hold. That's why he says it's a bad reasoning, not good reasoning. Suppose conscience is there, a stable, mature way of reasoning out. This is called habitus. Habitus means location where one is residing. The English words we get habitat. Our living rooms are called habitat. Habitation, we use the word, another word, habitation. So here also judgment of practical reason is in the practical reasons conscience can be seen whether it's a healthy or not matured conscience. A person's decisions can speak for the standard or the growth or clearness of a conscience. For St. Augustine, conscience is the place of the innermost encounter between God and man, Conscience is the divine center of the person. Conscience is the divine center of the person, where he is addressed by God, In line with this thought, Saint Bonaventure placed the innermost ground of conscience in the scintilla anima. Scintilla anima, meaning the spark of the soul. Bonaventure places the innermost ground of conscience in the scintilla anima, meaning the spark of the soul. It is that center of the soul where man encounters God, and is least accessible to the contamination of sin. So in the Vatican II Council also we have seen Gaudium Spes number 16 speaks of conscience, where God speaks to person face to face. A divine reality, human being encountering the divine reality. So also St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Bonaventure, all these give importance to the inner authenticity of the person, the inner reality, and that is what has to be taken care of. That's why sacredness of our conscience is a must, a obligation, and it has the capacity and is the ability, and that is seen when it is applied to particular situations, and that is called practical judgment. Our regular decisions, undertakings are seen as a practical judgment. That means how we are taking a decision. So that depending on your capacity. So that's why the conscience is an inner capacity a person has, and it is to be used in particular situations of life every day, not for some time, not for once in a way, not for once in life. So conscience is to be like a driver. I gave the example of the driver, no? The driver has to be active and alert. otherwise accidents will be there. So also if our conscience is not like active and alert, there will be accidents. So it will be a fatal accident. If the accident takes place, it will be a fatal.